Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to try out this wooden 3D puzzle by Craft & Co that I picked up for 10 euros. This is their train set, but they also had a plane and a motorcycle. So if this kit is actually any good, I think those might be interesting to some other people too. Now so far I've only seen the more expensive kits and built them myself, and I really hope that, for 10 bucks this is gonna be somewhat decent and we actually get the results on the packaging. So far it seems we actually have all the things we need in here. We actually get a piece of sandpaper, which is really nice, and I'm excited to see that we have bending parts. So the wood parts that are in the smallest sheet there are bendable because of the way they're cut. And then also it's nice to see that some of the parts are actually decorated with laser engraving and that they're all labeled. So I've had some kits before where the labeling was on a sheet of paper and you had to find the right sheet of wood to match, but this one luckily has it on the wood itself. The instructions are very straightforward. Every part is labeled and we have different boxes to separate certain steps. And also we get an explosive 3D view of all the parts and how they go together. Now finding all of those is a little bit like a search puzzle, which is always a bit interesting. I like search puzzles, so I didn't mind. It was sometimes just hard to see the parts. But they actually came out pretty easily for what they are, but one thing I noticed is that you have to be really careful, and if you can, push from the side that doesn't have the pattern on, because the tabs on the sides are sometimes ripping off the first layer of material. Now they say you need to sand some pieces, and actually you should sand all pieces. I thought they meant sand off the tabs, but after trying to fit the first piece I noticed some of the cutouts are not really rectangular, like what you need to actually fit a flat laser cut. They're actually oval, so to make them fit you really have to sand those down evenly, or else the pieces might split or not fit at all. And after a lot of sanding for the first piece I managed to finally fit the pieces on. I had to go a bit back and forth. Luckily I could still get it off, but it's definitely a thing that you have to pay attention to. And then I repeated that for all of the other pieces. And this sanding sadly also continued to most of the pieces. So in total I spend more time sanding than actually putting anything together. And some of the pieces when I tried to take them apart, they didn't really want to. I didn't really break any besides one, but that was on purpose because luckily there is spare, at least for some of the tiny parts, like for some of the gears and some of the tiny round bits, there is a spare. And as you also saw in the beginning, there's a spare for the movable or bendable part, which is definitely necessary because that part is really fragile. But this was basically 4 hours of straight up sanding and then putting together. Once the pieces fit, it was really satisfying to put them in. The one thing I just don't really understand is why some parts fit perfectly from the cutout and some you had to sand practically most of it. It's really sad to see because some of the pieces were really hard to sand because they were kind of in an awkward position in the parts, and it was not really easy to angle the sandpaper and all that. As you can see, I put mine on an acrylic box just so I have a sharp edge where I can lay the sandpaper onto. And after quite a while my sandpaper looked pretty messed up, but it actually did a job through the end, which was really nice. once you put the base together with the gears and you actually like fixated it with the cover part, the gear should technically move. Now the instructions in a very, very small part of it actually say that you should wax it up with something. I presume they mean like wood wax or anything like that. I didn't do that yet. I actually applied petroleum jelly later, which definitely helped, but right now the wheels are super, super stiff. And as you can see, again, I had to sand many tabs in awkward places, but it's starting to look like a base, which is really nice. And if it wasn't for the sanding, this would come together way easier, but picking apart the parts and like searching the parts was definitely the most fun part. And in the end, putting it together would have been probably fun if it would fit, but it wasn't really, because you had to pay so much attention to parts not breaking, and then you needed to figure out how much to sand other parts. Actually, for some parts in the end that got into like slits into slits, I had to take out my craft knife because there was just so much material that was excess and prevented the two parts from fitting that I actually had to like shave off like tiny slivers of it with my knife. Which I don't think it's that nice, but honestly, for the price of this kit, even having a finished model that is pretty much really decent and has moving parts is definitely something that needs to be taken into consideration. I actually didn't expect moving parts at all for this. I just thought it was like a nice little standing engine, but even the wheels on the side, when you move them, like the bar that connects them moves and the gears move, but I will show you all that in the end. Now some parts it was actually easier to sand them while they're already put together, just so you had some grip, because the tiny parts for the wheels, for example, they were so like small, actually holding them in your hands would mean you would probably sand your fingers. I tried, and then I decided to just put the wheels on first and then sand, and it was definitely the right choice. But in the end, looks-wise, it looks really good. And we even have doors that open and close, although those you need to be very exact with, because the like sides are like really, really tightly toleranced, which means that if you like put one thing not on properly enough, one of the tabs, the door will not open. So I had to struggle with that a little bit, and in the end one of the tabs I even had to sand a bit more. But once they were done, the doors were pretty cute. And actually the moving parts are also the like top like cover or like sunroof kind of thing on top of the engine cabin. So basically we have the moving wheels with the gears, we have the engine cabin, the roof and the doors, which is really neat because that means you can have it like at least somewhat differently posed, basically, for like when you want to display it. Now to the one part where I said I was really happy that we had a replacement. I sanded these pretty liberally, and then I tried to carefully push the moving parts together, and it just snapped. It just straight up snapped. So I sanded them even more, and I sanded more than half of this down to make the tabs fit, and I also made sure that they really fit. I tested each and every one loosely before I put them on, and then you can see that some of the tabs are connected in the middle by a bar. There you can kind of push, the others you cannot, because it's actually like offset from where the tabs are. So if you push there, that's the breaking point, and that's also where mine broke when I tried this first. So beware of that, spend some time carefully sanding, and of course don't apply too much pressure while sanding, because this piece is also moving while you're doing that. And then carefully put it into one side, and then carefully line up the other side. Now the tabs have a direction, so they don't fit in both sides, which is really helpful, but also means, as I said, that they're a bit offset. But in the end it turned out pretty fine. I was actually super nervous that I would break this part. And then there were also some parts that were like a bit difficult to get together, because basically you had to shove in one piece and then move it slightly sideways to make it fit. And some other parts that had like tiny grooves, which would basically act like as like hooks. And those would actually make like very, very like nasty sounds, like as if something would break while you were pushing them in, but once they locked in place, they actually held up really well. I didn't have to use glue at all for any of the pieces. The one thing I had to use though was a hammer. I tried to get this piece in like after I sanded it a bit, and it wasn't enough, but in the end I couldn't get it back out, so I used a hammer and a felt piece underneath to protect it. It did get a bit dented, but in the end it worked out pretty well, which I'm glad about. Now, the only thing I had to actually super glue is I had some pieces on the top near the end, which were super, super thin, like rail pieces that should hold everything together, but because they didn't quite fit perfectly with how I put it together, I guess they're like not having enough tolerance, actually the lamp broke up on the middle one, which all I did was use a tiny drop of super glue and glue that back on, and it worked perfectly fine. Technically you can still put it apart, although I would probably never pull this apart again. But it was definitely sad to see it break, but considering it was a really, really thin piece, it's actually not that surprising. Now, one other trick I had up my sleeve was actually for some pieces where there were tabs and you couldn't really push with your fingers, I actually used the side of my scissors, the metal part, because that was thin enough to fit in between the tabs and gave me enough pressure to actually perfectly put them together. And luckily that worked out really well without breaking anything. The one thing I just have to say is that the pressure you need for some of those is so much that first of all it feels like you're practically breaking the wood, but it is actually pretty sturdy, I'm surprised. Besides those like tiny pieces that weren't really fitting, like breakage wasn't really an issue. The other thing is also my fingers hurt quite a bit after this. I was like putting so much pressure, especially on my thumb, that I needed a big rest after this, and like grabbing any pen or anything that would especially like put pressure on my thumb would actually be quite uncomfortable. So yeah, either cover your finger if you have with like maybe a silicone protector or something like that, or if you have like a plastic tip glove or something, or just hope that it won't hurt as much, or work in like small increments and like put this together in like small parts and give your fingers enough rest to actually heal back and like that back to not hurting again. Luckily it didn't last long, like the next day it was totally fine again, but that's definitely you have to pay attention to. So if you have to do some other things after you made this kit, beware that your fingers might hurt. Now I noticed straight away when I put the 4 front wheels on that even though I sanded them down quite a lot, they never perfectly fit and aligned. I will show you all later how like the wheels align, and sadly the front wheels are a little bit lower than the back wheels. And there was nothing I could do, like I sanded down all the pieces. I guess that's tolerances again. And actually for the piece that holds the wheels, I even had to shave off a little bit off the top with my knife again to make it fit. Which again worked out in the end, but definitely it was a bit like difficult to do because the pieces are like so close together again. And again, this is one of the pieces where I had to shave off or sand off basically like half of the whole material, which means that it was very, very dangerously prone to breaking. Definitely something you need to consider, but as I said, if it breaks, a little dab of super glue. I guess you can also use wood glue, but that would just take a while longer. And for the surface that you have to glue, if it's this small, I guess super glue just has a better grip on things. It just works out really well to use super glue here. And luckily some of the sides from the laser cutting, like the oils and stuff that are in the wood, they like make it shiny already. So if you like are a bit careful and only have like super glue on like the tiniest amounts, then even the sheen and stuff of that doesn't really catch the eye because it's so similar to the darkened edges of the pieces. And one thing that really surprised me was actually how clean they were cut, all things considered, because first of all, there wasn't much burnage. It was very clean cut. I only laser cut myself, and I know that with pieces like this, especially these kinds of like balsa or like layered balsa pieces, they like to get black around the edges and actually stain away, but all the pieces were like mainly like brownish and not really black, so you wouldn't really have any like marks on your fingers, which is pretty great, because if you give this to anybody that wears a white shirt, it would have definitely stained it, because like any soot like that actually like stains clothing, and since it's oil-based it's hard to get out, but luckily that wasn't an issue. Now, as you can see, I had to shave the part a little bit that I hammered because it flattened out a little, but that didn't pose any trouble at all. And here you can see me use the super glue a little bit. Actually, I had to also glue in the front label piece because there wasn't really anything that held it and it would fall off again, but again, you cannot really tell. And here's the finished engine. It has a lot of tiny details, which I'm really surprised about, and definitely for the scale you have, it looks pretty sweet. And as you can see, the doors move pretty easily. There's even like a tiny like groove for your finger for the top of the roof opening. And they even got a basically like 3D chimney snack and all that, which I think is really nice. So detail-wise, I have to give props to them. Like I wasn't actually expecting to get as much detail as was shown on the front packaging. As you can see, as after I looped them up with a little bit of, as I said, petroleum jelly, they worked pretty well. Some of these like more expensive kits, they actually come with wax cubes that you can rub on, but petroleum jelly in this case worked really well. As you can see, I need to also spin all the wheels. Now it would spin if you have a flat surface. I tested that if you put a little bit of force on. The problem just is that only the back wheel really has contact, which is not enough to make the gear spin, because you need all the wheels because they're connected and all the gears are like one gear cannot actually spin the whole set of gears because it is still wood, it has still friction. But overall, for like actually moving, even if I had to do it with my hands, this is pretty great. So, is this kit really worth it? I would say yes. You just need to be patient enough to actually sand everything down, and you need to be sometimes really careful where you put your hands when you press things together as to not break other thin things. But overall, detail wise and like movement wise, even for that price, like a price of 10 euros, which is like sometimes not even a fifth of what the other wooden kits cost, this is pretty great. Like, it's definitely a thing that if you ever wanted to try one of these wooden kits, is really nice to pick up. And as I said, there's other options, like a plane, a motorcycle and all that. I don't know if they have more, but those were the ones I saw in the shop. Anyways, hope you enjoyed me exploring this kit, and let me know in the comments down below, have you ever done any of these wood 3D puzzles, and which one? Have a great day, bye bye!